Senator Gregg, he's the ranking member of the Banking Committee. He's also a member of the Appropriations Committee. And Senator, good morning to you.
Hi, Becky. How are you doing?
Good.
It's great to talk to you again.
Well, it's good to see you here. We've got a lot to talk about. Why don't we start out with this tax battle that seems to be raging back and forth? There's been a lot of things said over the last week or so. You want to lay out where you think we stand right now? What options are on the table?
Well, let me start with the premise that the taxes aren't the problem. Spending's the problem. This government's gone from 20% of GDP when the Obama administration's Democratic Congress took over up to 24% of GDP. It's headed towards 27, 28% of GDP. That's a spending rate we can't afford, and that's what's driving the deficit. That's what's driving these trillion-dollar deficits, and that's what's driving the debt. And that's what's going to drive the doubling of the debt. In fact, revenues have been pretty robust up until we hit this recession under our present tax policies. And why should we be raising taxes in a time of recession? Makes no sense. But more importantly, why should we even consider raising taxes when spending is the problem, and we should be addressing the spending side of the ledger and doing something there? And all we're seeing from this Congress is more spending, no attempt to control spending.
Well, let's talk politics and reality. What's going to happen in the next 6 weeks or so before the actual election? What plans and proposals do you think will be brought forward, and how will that happen?
Well, I don't think much will happen, to be very honest with you, heading into this election. We're talking maybe 3 weeks of session by the House. We're talking 4 here in the Senate. But to pass any sort of major tax bill in that period would be very difficult and hopefully won't occur, a tax increase. After the session is going to be another interesting question, because you're going to have a lame duck session. You're going to have a lot of members here who won't be coming back for a variety of reasons. And you have to remember that the status quo is protected in the Senate by the fact that 40 people can control the floor of the Senate. And in this instance, unfortunately, the status quo leads to a significant tax increase on the American people, all the American people, because the tax rates jump in January unless we extend the present tax rate. So people on the left who very strongly want to drive taxes up because they want to drive up spending, some of my colleagues, especially here in the Senate, are really holding a lot of cards. And I think people should be aware of that. I don't think it's been focused on really by many people, but the cards are really in the hands of the people who want the taxes to go up, unfortunately, in my opinion.
You think that would happen, though? I mean, the idea of raising taxes on everyone. I haven't heard a single politician come out and say that what they'd like to see is raise taxes across the board.
Well, you don't hear that, but as a very practical matter, my view is we shouldn't be raising taxes at all. I think that's the view of the vast majority of Republicans. And if the alternative is that you're going to raise taxes on some and not on others, a lot of us are going to have problems voting for that, because we don't think that raising taxes makes sense in any scenario, and that we should be controlling spending instead. And then on the other side of the aisle, you got people who probably won't vote for a partial tax cut, for a tax cut which would include extending all the taxes as they presently are. So,
but Senator Gregg, are you saying right now that you would rather have all taxes rise than have the middle class, or however you want to portray this, have their taxes stay the same and have higher income people see their taxes raised? Boehner said the other day, if he had to vote for one or the other, if push came to shove, would you go ahead and allow everyone to see their taxes raised?
Becky, I'm not going to engage in that hypothetical, because that's what it is, a hypothetical. In my opinion, we shouldn't be raising taxes on anybody. That's my position.
Judd, you really don't have the jargon right at all. You're trying to skew these things. It's not raising taxes. It's letting temporary tax cuts expire.
It's revenue generation.
Yes, revenue generation. And the other thing that you
temporary tax cuts, these tax cuts are almost as old as you are.
I know.
10 years old.
That's awfully old. The other thing that I love to hear is that if you're not going to let them expire, you need to pay for them. I guess they're saying the money is already spent. So you need to come up with $700 billion, because it's not deficit neutral to let these things be extended, which is, I mean, I like the whole thinking there, that we've already spent that money. It was never yours, and you got to come up with that to plug that hole. They never talk about just the spending of what you said right from the start. Just don't spend it in the first place, then you don't have to find the money to pay for these things for where we were. Huh?
Too late.
That's the bottom line. Stop the spending. I mean, let's get to the facts. The facts are that this is a spending-driven fiscal crisis that we're headed towards. It is not a lack of revenue. The American people are not under tax. The American government is spending too much. And you hit the nail on the head. This is the This is not the government's money. This is the people's money. You know,
no, you started. No. You started 100.
We do not have a right to this money.
Wrong.
We should stop.
You started 100%. It's 100% of the government's money, and then they let you keep a certain amount eventually. You don't start at zero and go up from there. That's a mentality that I hear every day on this show. That you started.
Unfortunately, you are hearing that mentality here in the Congress too, because we have basically a Congress that's dominated by a party that first doesn't believe in capitalism, doesn't appear to believe in markets, certainly doesn't like profit, and loves higher spending. And they've got to feed the beast, which is the federal government spending process. And to do that, they need to raise taxes, and that's what they like to do. My view is we should control the spending, not look on the revenue side.
Cuba's coming around, Judd, and there's some nice beachfront property down there I'm looking at as they move towards capitalism and the free market. So think about that if you want to join me down there.
Yes. Well, if you find a nice beachfront property, I'll consider joining you.
All right, they're emphasizing the private sector down there now as we sort of.
Senator Gregg, thank you.
I cannot wait to come visit you in Havana.
Go Raul.
You're like the Godfather.
Former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan making some headlines this morning. He's speaking